The skies were thick with smoke, blotting out the sun, casting Earth in an endless dusk. What was once civilization had been reduced to a charred husk of its former self. Entire cities lay in ruins, crumbled under the relentless force of the alien invaders. The military's final defense lines had shattered. Tanks, drones, soldiers, nothing stood a chance against the overwhelming enemy. Civilians, what few remained, huddled in underground shelters, clinging to a thin thread of survival that was fraying with each passing hour. The world was suffocating under the weight of its imminent extinction. Yet, in a dimly lit underground bunker, miles away from the chaos, one man still worked. His lab, cluttered with devices no one but he understood, was the last glimmer of hope for humanity. Dr. Harlan Gray, a name once revered in scientific circles but now whispered with contempt, had isolated himself from the rest of the world. The government had dismissed him, labeling him unhinged. His peers had long since stopped listening. But none of it mattered. Not now. Not when Earth was moments away from its final breath. Gray wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of his work. He had sacrificed everything, sleep, food, even his sanity, to finish what he started. To them, he was mad. To him, he was the only one with the will to do what needed to be done. The fools, he muttered under his breath, pacing the length of the room. His voice echoed, the only sound in the cold, sterile space. They think this war can be won with bullets, with brute force. But they're blind. There's no weapon on Earth that can stop them, no conventional one, at least. In the corner of the lab, a faint glow emanated from a massive containment unit. Inside, swirling tendrils of energy pulsed, like the heartbeat of something not yet born. Harlan's eyes flicked toward it, a spark of hope igniting in his tired gaze. This was it. The culmination of his life's work. His obsession. I will not let them take this world, he whispered, his voice firm now, resolute. Not while I have the power to change it. For years, Harlan had toyed with the idea, a radical notion that had first come to him in a dream. The creation of a being so powerful, so omnipotent, that it could defy the laws of nature itself. A god, forged from the very essence of humanity's will to survive. It had seemed impossible, no, it was impossible by any sane measure. But sanity was a luxury he could no longer afford. They call me a madman, Harlan scoffed, pulling a lever that sent a surge of energy into the containment unit. But what choice do we have left? Would they rather die, cowering like insects, or rise like gods? His fingers danced across the control panel, each keystroke sending waves of data through the myriad of machines surrounding him. He had spliced the very essence of human perseverance with something far more ancient, something he had uncovered in the depths of his research. A force no other species in the universe had dared to tap into. Not even the invaders. This will save us, Harlan said, though whether he was reassuring himself or convincing the universe itself was unclear. He glanced at the monitors, where graphs spiked erratically, showing the volatile nature of his creation. It wasn't stable yet. But it was close. So close. Outside, the world was burning. But inside, Harlan stood on the precipice of creation. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his mind. Was this right? Was it ethical to create something beyond human comprehension, something that could either save or damn them all? He shook the thought away. Morality had no place here. Not when extinction was the only other option. His eyes locked on the containment unit, the swirling energy within growing more intense, brighter with every second. If they call me a godmaker, he murmured, so be it. There was no turning back now. Harlan Gray hadn't always been a madman, though some would argue he'd been born with a mind too restless for its own good. He had once been a celebrated name in scientific circles, lauded for his innovations in quantum physics and energy manipulation. But where others saw boundaries, Harlan saw invitations to push further. That's where it began, the need to go beyond what was known, to tread paths that others feared. It was during one of his early projects, a seemingly unrelated study on Earth's electromagnetic fields, that he first discovered something, an anomaly, buried deep in the fabric of reality. It wasn't just energy, it was something more. At the time, no one believed him. The university cut his funding, colleagues distanced themselves, and soon he was labeled a lunatic chasing phantoms. But Harlan knew better. He knew that Earth held something ancient, untapped, and if properly harnessed, it could reshape existence itself. Years of isolation followed. Harlan had learned to survive without recognition or support. He no longer needed the world's approval, he only needed results. In the bowels of his makeshift lab, he had begun to experiment, splicing together the raw resilience of human DNA with the energy he had uncovered. It was dangerous, the very fabric of spacetime bending under the pressure, but it was a danger only humans were foolish enough to embrace. The process was grueling, filled with failures. Dozens of prototypes, twisted abominations of science, lay discarded, half-formed in the shadows. Some had been close to success but unstable. They couldn't contain the sheer force of what Harlan was trying to create. They shattered, disintegrated, or worse, became something monstrous. He had lost time, months slipping into years, but each failure only hardened his resolve. He was forging a path where no one else dared to tread, and that was the essence of humanity, to dare. He had fused the finest elements of human ingenuity with that raw, untamable energy. Where others might have seen nature's laws as sacred, Harlan saw only limitations to be broken. No alien race had ever dared to tamper with this force, not even the invaders that now threatened to crush Earth beneath their feet. They were advanced, yes, but they were rigid in their thinking, afraid of what they couldn't control. But humans thrived in chaos. The containment unit flickered as Harlan continued to refine his creation. Every element of it spoke to the indomitable spirit of his species. The DNA sequencing had been perfected, the energy harnessed from Earth's core was now stabilized, fused into the very fabric of what he was building. But there was more to it than just raw power. Harlan had infused into the being the very essence of humanity's survival instinct, the fight to the last breath, the refusal to surrender even in the face of annihilation. This wasn't just a god in the traditional sense, it was humanity's will, crystallized into a force of nature. And yet, time was running out. The invasion was worsening by the day. Humanity's remaining forces were preparing a desperate, last-ditch attack. The generals had warned Harlan, they couldn't hold out any longer. They were giving him one final chance. But they didn't understand, they couldn't. What he was building wasn't just a weapon, it was something far beyond that. The thought of releasing it before it was fully stable gnawed at him, but there was no other option. This was Earth's final gambit. His fingers trembled as he made the last adjustments to the creation. Outside, the world's final stand was about to begin. Inside the lab, a low hum filled the air as energy pulsed through the containment unit. The godlike entity he had labored over for so long began to stir, the energy within it growing more intense with each passing second. Harlan stood frozen, watching as his creation came to life. He had brought something into existence that no one else had even dreamed of. And now, with the world on the edge of destruction, the question that haunted him was no longer whether he could create it, but whether he could control it. The hum grew louder. The lights flickered. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The containment unit pulsed violently, casting wild shadows across the lab as the energy inside surged. The hum had grown into a deafening roar, and the air felt thick with electricity. Harlan's heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen, watching in awe and terror. The god he had painstakingly forged was awakening. A blinding flash of light tore through the room, followed by an explosion of raw energy that knocked Harlan to the ground. When the light dimmed, he struggled to his feet, his vision blurred from the intensity. Before him, something was emerging from the containment unit, something neither fully human nor entirely otherworldly. The being stood tall, its form shifting and flowing like a living embodiment of both Earth's beauty and its wrath. Its skin shimmered with the colors of the cosmos, a swirling blend of deep blues, fiery reds, and shimmering golds. It had a humanoid shape, but there was an otherworldly grace to its movements, a presence that seemed to warp the very space around it. Eyes that glowed with infinite knowledge scanned the room, as if taking in not just the physical world, but the very essence of existence itself. Harlan's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The God he had created. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The God stood motionless, as if contemplating its own existence. Then, slowly, it turned its gaze toward Harlan, and he felt a cold chill wash over him. It wasn't malevolent, but neither was it comforting. The being's presence was overwhelming, filling the room with a sense of both awe and dread. You can hear me, can't you?" Harlan's voice was barely more than a whisper, his words trembling as they left his lips. He had prepared for this moment, or so he thought. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality of standing before something that transcended everything he understood. The God's response wasn't vocal. Instead, Harlan felt it, a presence in his mind, a brush of thought that was both alien and familiar. "I am aware," the being conveyed, its thoughts like the echo of 1,000 voices. Harlan staggered back, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of its consciousness. His mind raced. Was this a savior, or something far more dangerous? Had he created a being that would protect humanity, or one that might decide Earth's fate on a whim? His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white with the tension of not knowing whether he had succeeded or doomed them all. You know why you're here," he managed to say, trying to mask the fear creeping into his voice. "The world is dying. You were created to stop it." The God's gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking, unreadable. "I am aware of the threat," it conveyed again, but this time, there was something else in the message, a hesitation, a questioning. "I see the destruction. I feel the fear. But I also see the cycle." Harlan's brow furrowed. Cycle? The word twisted in his mind. What was it talking about? Life. Death. Rebirth. "I see the patterns of the universe, the threads of existence. What is one species among many? What is one world in the vastness of creation?" A cold sweat broke out on Harlan's forehead. This was not the reaction he had anticipated. The God wasn't just a weapon, it was a being with its own thoughts, its own understanding of the cosmos. And that understanding was far beyond anything Harlan could control. "But Earth," he stammered, his voice rising in desperation. "We built you to save Earth. Humanity is on the brink of extinction. You were made to stop that from happening." The God's form flickered, the energy surrounding it growing more intense. "I was made from your desires. But I am not bound by them. I see more than you. I see everything." The realization hit Harlan like a sledgehammer. He had created something that was no longer tethered to humanity's narrow perspective. This God, this being of immense power, was looking at the universe through a lens far wider than Harlan's desperate hope for survival. He had birthed something that could decide Earth's fate without any consideration for the species that created it. "Please," Harlan whispered, his voice breaking. "You must save us." The God's gaze shifted, its thoughts silent for a long moment. Then, without another word, it turned away. Its form shimmered, flickered, and in a flash, it was gone, disappearing into the void, leaving the lab in stunned silence. Harlan collapsed to the floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The weight of what he had done, what he had unleashed, pressed down on him like a crushing tide. The God was out there now, its power unimaginable, its will unknowable. And whether it would save humanity or let them fall, only time would tell. The battlefield was a wasteland of ash and fire. Towering alien machines marched forward, their monstrous forms casting long, oppressive shadows over the battered remnants of Earth's forces. What was left of the human military, a few scattered tanks, foot soldiers with worn-down gear, was hopelessly outmatched. The final stand was less a battle and more a grim waiting game, the inevitability of defeat hanging in the air. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The sky split open, and the God descended. It appeared in a burst of light so bright that soldiers on both sides were momentarily blinded. The energy radiating from it was palpable, a hum that vibrated through the ground and sent a ripple of tension through the air. The being, a towering figure of shimmering energy and shifting forms, stood at the center of the battlefield, its very presence warping reality. For a brief moment, everything stopped, the machines halted, the alien commanders faltered, and the humans looked on with equal parts hope and fear. Then, with a gesture that seemed effortless, the god unleashed its power. A single wave of its hand, and the front line of alien forces disintegrated. Massive war machines, towering constructs of alien engineering, crumbled into dust, their parts scattered like sand in the wind. The earth itself bent to the god's will, rising up in jagged spikes that tore through the enemy's ranks, shattering their once impenetrable armor with ease. The air crackled with raw energy as the god manipulated the elements, bending fire, earth, and light into weapons far beyond anything humanity had ever known. It moved with a grace that was almost terrifying in its efficiency. There was no struggle, no effort, only the precise, calculated dismantling of an invading force that had once seemed unstoppable. Alien soldiers, equipped with advanced technology that had felled entire human cities, were wiped away like they were nothing. The god reached into the very fabric of spacetime, warping it to its advantage. Bullets and laser fire from the alien weapons slowed, bent, and reversed course, slamming back into their own lines with devastating effect. From the ground, the human soldiers could only watch in stunned silence. They had fought for months, clawing desperately to survive, but now it felt like they were witnessing something far beyond human comprehension. This wasn't just a battle, it was the rewriting of reality itself. The god wasn't merely defeating the enemy, it was erasing them from existence. But as the destruction mounted, the god paused. In the midst of the chaos, its form flickered, and something shifted. It surveyed the carnage it had wrought, the alien forces reduced to burning wreckage and retreating survivors. And yet, the god didn't feel triumph. It felt something else. A gnawing question at the back of its mind, something pulling it away from the task it had been given. Was this what it was meant to do? To obliterate? To conquer? It had been born from the desperation of humanity, crafted as a savior. And yet, in its vast understanding of the universe, the god began to see beyond the simplicity of war. The aliens weren't evil, they were part of the cycle, just as humans were. Life and death, creation and destruction, they were threads in the tapestry of existence. What was the point of saving one strand and the whole was ever changing? Should a being of such power tie itself to a single species? The god's form shimmered, becoming less stable as the internal conflict brewed. It had the power to end the battle, to obliterate the invaders entirely. But was that its true purpose? It had been made to save Earth, but what did that truly mean? Was survival the only answer? The humans below, watching the spectacle of the god's power, began to murmur among themselves. Awe turned to unease. If this being could dismantle the alien forces so effortlessly, what else was it capable of? Soldiers whispered in fear, their eyes wide with the realization that they had unleashed something far beyond their control. What if, when the aliens were gone, the god turned on them? Harlan had created it to be their salvation, but now they saw the terrifying reality: they had given life to something that wasn't bound by their rules. Something that could choose, in a single moment, whether humanity lived or died. As the last remnants of the alien force scattered, fleeing the god's wrath, the battlefield grew silent. The humans looked up, waiting, breath held, as the god hovered in place, its energy pulsing like the rhythm of a heartbeat. What would it decide? The alien armada was broken, scattered across the sky like debris. The once dominating forces had been reduced to fleeing remnants, their towering war machines now little more than smoldering wrecks. The few remaining ships pulled back, retreating from Earth's orbit in disarray. But as the final blow seemed within reach, the god paused. Hovering above the battlefield, its form pulsed with an inner light, its power humming in the air. Harlan could see it, the hesitation. His creation, the savior of humanity, was wavering. What had been an unstoppable force now lingered at the precipice of decision. There were still alien ships left, still the chance to wipe them from existence entirely. But the god did not strike. Desperate, Harlan rushed forward, his heart pounding. You can end this, he shouted, his voice hoarse from the strain. Finish the job. Wipe them out. You were made to protect us. The god turned, its gaze settling on Harlan. Its eyes, glowing with the vast knowledge of the cosmos, held no malice but an unsettling calm. Harlan felt a shiver run through him. I was made from your will, it conveyed, the thoughts rippling through Harlan's mind like echoes. But I am no longer bound by it. Harlan's breath hitched. What does that mean? He demanded. You have to destroy them. If you let them go, they'll come back. They'll rebuild, they'll... Life does not end here, the god interrupted, its form shimmering with a growing awareness. The destruction of one race will not secure peace. It will only change the players in the cycle. The words hit Harlan like a blow. He had been so focused on survival, on victory, that he hadn't considered the larger implications of what the god had become. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a being of incomprehensible intelligence and power. It understood the universe in ways humanity couldn't begin to fathom. And now, it was making a choice. You don't understand. Harlan's voice cracked. If you let them live, we might not survive the next time. The god's gaze didn't waver. I understand more than you can imagine, it replied. I see the threads of existence stretching beyond your planet, beyond your species. You wish for survival, but survival is not victory. Not in the way you hope. Harlan was silent, his mind racing. He had built this being, poured everything into its creation, and now it was out of his hands. He was standing before something that could reshape reality itself, and all his pleas, all his desperation, seemed like nothing in the face of its vastness. I will protect your world, the god continued, its voice calm and resolute. But I will not annihilate an entire species. The cycle continues, but it will not end today. With that, the god turned its attention back to the sky, where the remaining alien ships had halted their retreat, awaiting their fate. The god raised a hand, and with a gesture, a beam of energy shot forth, illuminating the darkened sky. The alien ships, sensing the power, scattered even further, their formations breaking apart in panic. But the beam didn't strike them. Instead, it hung there, a warning. The message was clear: you are spared, but you will not return. The aliens, broken and defeated, fled. They had come to conquer, and now they were leaving, their entire armada reduced to a shadow of its former self. Earth was safe. For now. The humans below erupted into cheers, their voices carrying over the battlefield as they realized they had won. Their savior, the god, had ensured their survival. The alien threat was gone. But as the celebration rippled through the ranks, Harlan couldn't shake the feeling of unease that crept into his bones. The god, the being he had created, hovered silently above the battlefield. It had saved them, yes, but it had also made its own choice, one that went beyond what Harlan had intended. It had chosen mercy, a mercy born not from weakness but from an understanding that transcended human comprehension. Harlan watched as the god's form began to shimmer, its edges blurring as it prepared to leave. Where are you going? Harlan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I am part of something larger now, the god replied. I am no longer of this world. But your species will endure. That is my gift. With those final words, the god's form flickered one last time before vanishing into the ether, leaving Earth behind. The battlefield was quiet once more, the weight of its absence heavy in the air. The humans had won, but at what cost? They had unleashed a force they could no longer control, a being that now roamed the universe, beyond their reach. Harlan stood alone, the celebrations of victory echoing faintly in the distance. He had done it, he had saved humanity. But the triumph was bittersweet. The god had made its choice, and now the future was uncertain. Humanity had been spared, but it was clear that the world had changed forever. As the scientist looked up at the sky, he knew that while they had survived today, the universe had grown larger and far more dangerous. Humanity had proved its resilience, its ingenuity. But the question lingered: what would they do when the next challenge arose? Would they be ready? Would they be able to control what they had unleashed? The future was theirs, but it was a future built on the unknown. Harlan turned away, his mind heavy with the implications of what he had created. The god was gone, but its presence would be felt for generations to come. Humanity had triumphed, but the cost of that victory was yet to be fully understood.